Greetings! Welcome to Excel Module 1. In this video, we're going to discuss getting started in Excel and the basics of Excel. Let's start. Okay, so the first thing I've done here is I've navigated to my Microsoft365.com page. This is the landing page for Microsoft 365. You'll see recent files you've worked in and a list of files. I'm going to navigate over to the Excel app part of 365. And here we're in the section that handles the Excel files. So you can see recent files, all of your files, and suggestions for templates. Also a blank workbook. That's how we'll start right now. So if you're beginning a new Excel spreadsheet, this is how to do it. Open a blank workbook. Here's what a blank workbook looks like. You'll notice first across the top that we have a ribbon, very common in all the Microsoft Office applications. This one looks quite a bit like Microsoft Word's ribbon. They all share the same features where there are tabs across the top, and then inside of the ribbon there are groups. So here we are on the Home tab, and you will see the Clipboard tab and the Font tab and the Alignment, Clipboard group, Font group, and Alignment group. We see those also in all of the other Office apps. As we go across, though, you'll notice something that's different and specific to Excel. We've got the number group here, ways to format our numbers. We'll be talking about those. The styles group, you have styling in here just like other Microsoft apps. And you have a cell selection group. We saw that in Word tables. An editing group, which will allow you to do some mathematical functions and as well as some sorting. So if we were to just talk about the worksheet itself, here we see cells, a big grouping of cells which are made by having columns and rows. Across the top, you'll see the column names. By default, they're set as the alphabet. And down the side, we will have the row numbers. So those are numerical as we go down. Now, moving around in the cell, the most simple way to access any given cell is simply just click. So I can click and move around and choose different cells. Now notice as I do it, the column and the row is highlighted. And we know that we're at cell D7 because that is the intersection of this cell in column D and row 7. I can also select a range of cells. So by clicking and holding, I can simply drag and I'll be selecting a range. And notice the column letters are highlighted again here and the row numbers are highlighted here. So that is a range of cells versus a single cell like D3. Okay, let's talk about moving around in here. Now, I can, as we just saw, click and choose a cell. I can drag and select a range of cells. But if I want to move around, I can just simply use my arrow keys. Now, so what I'm doing here is just using my arrow keys to move up, down, left, and right. Another way to move around is tab. Tab will move you left and right. So I'm now tabbing, which is moving me to the right. I can hold Shift Tab and move backwards. So it's pretty common to use the tab to move left and right, and the arrows can be used to move up and down. Let's switch now to a sheet that I have where there's a little bit of data. It's also got my list of topics that we're going to cover here. Now, as I go through these list of topics, what I will do is highlight the cell to show that we've gone over it. So I'm going to actually choose this cell by clicking, which is G11. And I can come up here to my fill color, which will color the cell, and I'll just choose this background green. Notice when I did that, if I were to select here a fill color and move around, you get a preview. So you can immediately see what the final color will look like as I just hover inside of the theme colors, as well as the standard colors down here. So that's a preview feature. Actually, I'm going to change this second one here as well. I've got my color already preset. So I've discussed moving around with the arrow keys and the tab key. I've also discussed selecting cells individually and cell ranges. So now let's talk about adding data in cells. Now I've got some data here, but I want to talk about the movement that you get when you do add cells. And this comes into play when you're first building your worksheet and entering a lot of data. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to add a row of data that is for, we'll say, CrossFit. Okay, so to add the data in any cell, you simply highlight the cell. It is now highlighted green. Okay, if that's the case, I can just start typing. I don't have to get into the cell and see a cursor. I can start typing, and immediately I'm entering data into the cell. Now notice something else. Up here, we have what's called the formula bar. Okay, this bar up here will always show you what's inside the cell. I can also edit here. So if I were to select a cell here and come to the formula bar and come up here and type hello, we see that it's immediately duplicated in the cell. And you'll actually be able to see everything in the cell. So sometimes it's easier to work up here in this entry point of adding functions and text, or just working inside the cell. Okay, let me show you another thing. If I'm simply highlighted on that cell that I just put in and I hit the delete key, it takes the data all the way away. Let me undo that. If I wanted to edit this data, as I just mentioned, it can be edited up here where I add to it in the function bar, or if I want to edit in the cell, what you do then is you double click in the cell. That will drop a cursor. And so now working in the cell, I can work just like I would normally work in any other text editing situation. So single click will allow you to get immediate access to the cell for typing. I can type right over this by just single clicking on the cell. Once I see the green bar around it with no cursor, I can override the entire contents of the cell just by starting to type. So that's a quick thing to think about. As soon as you select the cell, you can start typing. As soon as you select the cell, you can delete. As soon as you select the cell, you can overwrite the cell. Okay, let me conclude this part by just talking about movement. Now, if I had just finished editing this cell, which I have done, if I want to move to the right to now work on the cell to the right of it, I use the tab button. That takes me to the right. If I were working in this cell and I wanted to move downwards, I can hit the enter key. That will move me down. So when you are working in cells, enter will continue to let me go down. When you're working in cells, depending on which way you are adding things, it's handy to use either tab or enter. Now, as I go along, I may end up with contents in the cell that don't fit inside its current width of the column or height of the row. To resize columns, all you simply do is come up to the column row up here, the heading row of the column, or the heading row, the row column here, and highlight over the divider between columns. We'll do the columns first. If I click and drag, I'm now resizing the width of this column A. I could do the same thing for column B and click and size. So this can be done all across in rows. Let me get to a middle row here and get my height adjustment and drag down. I can make this row larger. Okay, I'm going to undo that. So that is an important feature once you get to filling in a lot of data. You want to get this to lay out and have everything fit properly. Another feature of this is auto sizing. So the sizing of this column is going to be judged by this cell, cell A1, because it's got the most text in it. If I come here to the divider between columns and double click, it auto sizes. So now I've got the size that best fits, just fits the largest portion. I can do the same thing to column B. If I can get onto it. Okay, calculates the width, the minimum width I'll have. I think column C is probably already there. Oh, it came in just a bit. So now we see that the columns are at their tightest. If I double click auto fit, that will shrink the column or the row to contain the contents that I have. Okay, so there's column row sizing manually or auto sizing. Now, let's break away from working inside of the sheet for 1 second and talk about the overall worksheet and the number of worksheets. So this, when we're looking at one page, is a worksheet. If we have multiple worksheets, which we'll look at right now, that is then in your workbook. And actually, this is a workbook containing one worksheet. Workbooks can contain multiple worksheets where you have different data all under the same topic. For instance, I could look at another aspect of Profit Hendo, and that is their supplies that they have for maintenance of the facility, or vehicles. So we could have different worksheets which are all under the same workbook. If I want to make more worksheets, I come down here to the bottom row here. You'll see by default this is sheet 1. I can click the plus and I'll make another sheet. So this one is a blank sheet now. Let's make a third. Here's 3 worksheets now inside of the workbook for Profit Hendo. And I can just certainly click between them and select what I want. I can also change the order by holding the sheet and dragging. That will rearrange the worksheets. Retitling. If I double click this sheet, I can now change this to first quarter sales. Okay. This second sheet might be second quarter. Let's click that and I'll just type that in real quick. Second quarter sales. And you can see how that works. So once we start building the different worksheets in the workbook, we want to have them labeled correctly so that we can work with them. I can right click on this sheet and I can delete that sheet. We're not going to need sheet 3, so I'm just going to delete it and I'll say okay. It gives me a warning because I may be deleting some data. I can do some other things. I can actually come in here and change the color of each tab. We'll say that second quarter is green and first quarter is blue. Okay, so this gives you another little bit of a visual way to keep track of things down here in the sheets. Okay, and finally, if I did want to rename, I would just double click again and I have the option to rename. Okay, so I'm not going to need second quarter sales in this case, so I'll delete that sheet and we'll just stick with first quarter sales for Profit Hendo.